Weekly Download, a podcast about interesting games, industry news.
Brought to you by Big Games Machine.
I mean, with buskers, obviously recording a lot of popular songs, if there was going to be a video game busker, what do you think they should be singing? There's a lot of choices. As our resident music expert here, John, debuting on the pod.
I've got to say, actually, I mean, I love the fact that video game music has become its own thing, but my God, I wouldn't want to listen to most of it. So I suppose what I'd want is like a really, really frenetic Japanese style, like rock RPG soundtrack, like really, really fast, like thrash speed. I think that would be good for busking.
For the morning commute as well, that would get the legs moving. People needing the trains.
Yeah.
I'd quite like, if just one day Ice Cube can do a actual cover of, because the KK Slide version of A Good Day is really good, ironically.
Yeah.
To get an actual
That's
cover,
right
that
at the
would be amazing.
other energy level, isn't it? KK Slider.
Oh, yeah. Much more chilled out for on the way back from the commute.
Maybe there used to be a busker actually in Brighton years ago when I first moved down here, and he would dress in was it Rolf the dog, the big dog off the Muppets?
My Muppet knowledge is not that strong.
He's like a giant brown shaggy dog, and then play the piano. And he was technically very, very good, but also dressed as Rolf the dog. So I think nobody's done KK Slider. Maybe that's a gap in the market. Is KK Slider impersonators?
We'll see. Well, what hasn't been done yet is you yourself on the pod. So welcome in. For listeners who aren't aware, this is the weekly download where we bring you all the stories from the past week into a nice condensed format to keep you updated on all the happenings in the games industry. So I am joined today by John, a games industry veteran, as we are going to tackle some interesting topics, as we always do on the show. Welcome aboard.
Thank you very much, Jack. Pleasure to be here.
Well, we're going to jump straight into the first of our three main stories, and we're going to be talking about something that has dominated not just the game space this week, but all aspects of everything from entertainment to financials in general. The Netflix acquisition of Warner Bros. And the attempted deal, because we had another last-minute bid to try and top that. So the Netflix co-CEO, Gregory Peters, has said that the company hadn't even factored in the valuation of games into the deal because there are a lot of IPs owned and they hadn't really considered that, which is an interesting thing. If you're one of those studios as part of that umbrella thinking we're kind of getting overlooked here or we're already been told we're not that important, isn't a great sign. So as someone who's worked with a lot of brands over the years, John, what's your view on this as a quite interesting topic?
It's a funny one because I think there was so much focus on who's going to own. Well, at the moment, there's a big political discussion about who's going to end up owning the news channels and leverage and politics and stuff. And you kind of almost forget that Warner Brothers Gaming is a thing because they've so spectacularly managed to destroy themselves for the past 12 months. But yeah, I was having a think about it and I was trying to act, when you're like a super important CEO who's really clever, and I tried to pretend I was one of them. Yeah. Thought, actually, it's quite funny because it shows it's kind of like big, important people going, oh no, games are kids stuff. Games are too complicated. We're not interested in it. And actually, I dug out some numbers and the game stuff makes quite a lot of money. But I just think I get the impression that they're just going, it's too complicated. It's not what we want to do because they've been divesting, haven't they? They kind of invested an awful lot in creating their own studios, closed them all down. And then they've done Red Dead Redemption and did they do something with Death Stranding as well? But in terms of being able to distribute existing IP.
Yeah, I think you've hit on the head there. The existing IP is the key part of this because Harry Potter screams out as they can get Hogwarts Legacy. What can they do with that? Because it doesn't feel like they're going to turn around and say, right, we need to invest in making the next Hogwarts Legacy is a big part of the reason why we're making this deal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so Hogwarts Legacy is made by Avalanche. So it's of the games that they've done recently, Hogwarts Legacy is not a studio that Warner Brothers own. So maybe there's leeway within that deal where they're going, oh, well, it's not part of an acquisition, but it's a licensing deal we're happy to do, right? I mean, I can imagine that Netflix are not so stupid as to say, oh, well, we're not interested in games as a way to license and get value, but they don't want to take that cost risk. Because I actually I looked up some numbers, and actually Hogwarts Legacy as a game cost about the same as one of the Harry Potter movies to make, right? So it's around $150 to $180 million is what supposedly Hogwarts Legacy cost. And then it's done about $1 billion in worldwide revenue, right? So it's done really, really well. If you look at the movies have cost about $130 million to make. And on average, they've taken $770 million. So actually the multiples of the amount of cost to the amount of return is not a million miles apart. But I just think that Netflix is sitting there going, we've got out of games, we're not going back in, you know?
Yeah, it's almost like they've bought a bundle effectively, and this is part of it. It's not something they're really looking to use. So it's definitely interesting to see where they go with it, because as you've shown with the numbers there, as a form of entertainment, games can make as much or even more than certain movies. And if Netflix decides that perhaps that's something they can leverage, it might signal quite a big shift away from its current strategy. But I agree and think that it's not really going to change in the way that you might think with such a big deal.
I think as well. Yeah, I think as well. There's a couple of people. There's some good analysis of it in Pocket Gamer, Eurogamer, and GI.biz. I had a look at, and you know, a couple of people that have been asked about it have gone, oh well, there's a great opportunity here for this like transmedia, right? Transmedia only seems to work in Asia, right? Because it's very driven by anime, but you also have physical retail, you have manufacturing, you have lots and lots more branding. So to say, oh, there's a great opportunity here because Netflix are going to have access potentially to the movie catalogue, to the TV series that they're doing, and therefore the games. You know, it's a lot. For it to work, it's got to have a lot more moving parts. And I think that's really sensible viewpoint on it. We've seen so many times, bolting a video game onto a movie franchise can work, but mostly doesn't. And so I think for those reasons, Netflix don't want to get involved.
Yeah. Oh, you give me flashbacks to growing up with all the THQ branded games of everything. Everything got a game, which we have moved away from. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Netflix do with that. And I think the kind of comparison there to what we see in Asia is really interesting, because just this week it was announced that we're having collaborations with The Witcher as an IP in other mobile games, and we've seen it before with a few other things that exist in the West as its own game, but then is seen more as a brand perhaps in other Asian markets with a kind of lower console input. So yeah, an interesting one to keep an eye on, as we say a lot on this show, but this one particularly because it's such a fast moving deal that at one point was expected to be done and dusted, and the next minute nothing's happening. So we'll see this time next week what the latest take is going to be on that. So I'm going to skip to the next episode now, like we're watching. If you guys have any final points, say them now. Otherwise, we'll hit on to the next one.
No, I'm good to go.
Excellent. So as we move on to our second story, we're going to stay in the realm of acquisitions, but this one's slightly different. Tencent is selling part of its portfolio to a newly formed consortium backed by the owner of Team 17. So interesting cultural clash across the gaming sphere here. This is a British developer sold to Super Media Group alongside Hero Capital and Everplay Group, which is Team 17's parent company. So I think to start with this, what does the formation of this consortium suggest about how the funding and consolidation happening among mid-sized developers right now, especially in the UK? Is there anything we can glean from this type of deal? Yeah, the general line of that was basically Tencent divesting, but it's more about the talent at these places. They want to keep more than certain IPs because there's some good talent here moving, was my kind of bit on going with it.
Yeah, you made the point that Tencent are really big, so they've already got a really big portfolio, so they can probably be a bit more
choosy. I think it aligns with the strategy Tencent has at the minute, where they're focused on larger development projects. And I think the key thing here as well, with this being a British-based studio, the UK games industry is in a weird spot the industry as a whole is in a weird spot, but especially the UK with some of the big names that have left the industry or been shut down. Lots of acquisitions already. So seeing something go the other way is quite an interesting thing to see.
I'm surprised how little I've seen it in the press, actually. I mean, unless I've just totally missed it, I didn't see an awful lot of reporting of this. And you're right, it's quite a big deal because, you know, it was only a few weeks ago that NetEase just started shutting down a load of studios, you know, where they'd obviously gone through and they've set up studios, have invested, and then they've just killed that IP and closed the studio down. To have Tencent actively investing, I would have thought that the UK press would make a bit more of it.
One to keep an eye on, as we keep saying here. It's because with the way we're trying to pick out stories for the show, you're quite right that some things go under the radar, it seems. So wondering if it will go quiet again, if they've not announced they're going to be working on anything specifically. We'll see. I think a key point to wrap this topic up on here is that Everplay acquired a 20% stake in SMG as part of the deal, linking it more deeply with Bulkhead. And it's a sign, some might say, that SMG may be looking to explore co-development in Hell Let Loose, which I say I was a big fan of. I haven't played it in a while. And then Bulkhead's War Dogs. So there are some IPs attached in the mix somewhere, which maybe separates it a bit differently from other deals where there's no IPs yet. We'll see with that one. But all seems amenable. What didn't seem very amenable as we come to our third story of the day, we go to Square Enix, where 3D Investment Partners, which holds a 14.36% stake in Square Enix, drops even a 100-page presentation criticizing how Square Enix is managed and just saying how upset they were with it, which is an interesting one to read in these industry topics. I think a key point to lead with is looking at who 3D Investment Partners are. They are an activist fund and an aggressive one at that. So this type of thing isn't out of their wheelhouse. But for it to happen to Square, I think that's why it's making news. The presentation blames a lot of the 100 pages are dedicated to blaming underperformance in console and mobile. They view arcade and publishing as dragging value down, which I think is quite a Japanese thing with the arcade elements there, and also just large write-downs from cancelled games. So they were the topics they picked out. And their general goal is to rally the other shareholders to reboot the strategy because they don't think that Square Enix is looking long-term enough and they don't think anything is working. And you'd think they might have kept those thoughts privately, but they didn't see any movement, so that's why they went public. Like when you see back in the day, people posting, footballers posting things on X or Twitter back when it was about wanting to move out. Maybe a more prescient example is the Mo Salah of last week and the comments he made of not enjoying time at Liverpool. Yeah. A lot to unpick here.
Yeah, I very often, as you say, Jack, activist investors go public on something, so it creates a debate that the company can't avoid having. So I do get the sense that there's a lot of that here because I think everyone would accept that Square Enix has made some missteps strategically. As you say, some of the reboots haven't been that brilliant. I get the sense as a game fan myself, they're just retreading the same ground over and over. And, they tried that online shooter that they did with People Can Fly. Was it Outriders or something like that? They killed that IP.
Oh, that's another blast from the past. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So they've experimented and killed stuff. Then they made that announcement a couple of weeks ago about how they're going to cut a lot of staff and put all their QA through AI. People have very mixed feelings about in the industry. So this could just be an investor just saying, look, you guys, just need to get your act together and come up with something that's a bit more interesting than doing the same thing with a few tweaks.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you've referenced AI there, it almost seems like Square is perhaps an easy target. They have the name, they have had some missteps, to put it lightly, recently. Dropping a 100-page presentation on this is going to get headlines and get the eyes on they want than if they tried it at a, not just a smaller publisher, but maybe one people have kind of forgotten about that doesn't have the name anymore. It might still be a large size, but Square has its hands in a lot of different buckets. So it makes sense that one big presentation can affect a lot of different sides of the business, as they touched on arcade, they've touched on publishing, they've touched on all the reboots and the remasters that Square is trying to do with its own IPs. So I think we have to think what happens next is, how does Square respond to this? Because as you've said, this happens quite a bit and there are different ways to respond. They could resist, they could capitulate, they could make some major concessions. We don't know. But I think it's a big test, as this is a very game-specific example of how an activist investor can shake the boat in a way we don't normally see with games, but we might see quite a bit with other investment firms.
These activist investors, are they Japanese or are they Western? I haven't looked into it.
So 3D investment partners are Japanese.
Right. So that does
but
add
I
another.
Think legally they may be based in Singapore, but yes, definitely that region.
Right, because that's quite interesting, because culturally then it would be far more normal for a Western investor to act like this, and it's not very Japanese to go public. But again, that just could be an indication of the lack of engagement between the leadership team at Square Enix and the wider investors and the wider decision making group, because you would have thought they'd do something behind closed doors. But yeah, I always get the sense from Square that they are still resting on the big IPs, like Final Fantasy, obviously. Kingdom Hearts is theirs as well, their development of Disney IP, isn't it? And that keeps getting reboots. And I don't feel, I mean, again, we have a particular view in Western markets, but they're not as big as they should be on mobile with the amount of great IP they've got. I can definitely see, I think what's potentially positive about it is that it's not saying that the company is being badly run or need a leadership change or is going in the wrong direction. It's kind of more directed as you're not executing as well as you should be, and you're not coming up, as you say, with fresh ideas. So maybe it's, let's see what next year holds, if it makes any difference.
Yeah, I think next year, what I would like to read out really quickly is just some of the core values from 3D partners on their website, because I think this is an interesting insight into maybe why they dropped this. They say, integrity before everything. We are transparent and respectful to investors and companies. We shall inspire each other to grow through constantly learning. And then this one, confidence through self-reflection. We discover our strengths and weaknesses through self-reflection. Confidence is built by knowing who we are. And the final one I want to read here, humility in our heart. We owe our existence to the society we share our lives with. We will always be humble in our ideas to the market and to our community. Yeah, you make your own judgment, listeners, if a 100-page presentation reflects those core values or not. And that brings us on to my favourite part of the show, the rapid rundown, where we have a bit of everything to wrap up the show with. So we're going to start with Call of Duty, because who can't do a show without talking about Call of Duty? They're not going to release series entries back-to-back anymore, so we're not going to get a Black Ops 6 immediately followed by a Black Ops 7, because they finally listened to the fans. It took them a long time. But how do you feel when you've bought a game and then you hear a year later, we're getting another one, and it's not a sports title, because they seem to exist in their own bubble of being allowed to do that. But when it's a non-sports title, it's a bit tricky.
I mean, if you've got a franchise, there are two things you can do with that franchise. You can have a narrative that develops, right? So you've got you've got a reason to follow the story, follow the characters. So I know we're going to talk about another big franchise that does this very well in a minute. Or you've got technology change, right? You've got a big step up in either graphics or map size or something that makes you want to go back and experience it differently. And I think if we're looking at what's happening, particularly in the Call of Duty style game, where can you go? You've got super accurate modeled physics, guns, stuff. And it's interesting, the response from the fan base to this weird psychedelic storyline where people are fighting monstrous plants and, you know, the old trope of the butterfly and the cracking screen and what's real or what isn't. I mean, to me, I'm one of those fans, which is Call of Duty is a war game. And I like running around and hiding and shooting people. I don't need to have some really weird tacked on single player mission to it. So I think it's inevitable. You just can't keep churning out a AAA quality game on an annual basis.
Yes. And I think some of the shortcuts we're seeing in the genre with the creep in of AI generated content shows that pressure is being felt more than ever. And they are needing to find where they can cut corners if they have only very limited ways of innovating. I think a big part of these is because it feels like it's a glorified DLC when you're playing the same game. If it is only a narrative and all the other locations are the same, then you're like, do I need to spend the same amount of money I've just paid for the kind of part 5 of a... You don't know how long the narrative's going to be. And as you say, with all the psychedelic things, we've come a long way from when Black Ops was just about, hey, we're going to explore the Cold War and what we didn't hear about and all the CIA black sites and things like that. Okay, now we're into, it feels like Fast and Furious going to space type thing. I mean, we've gone to space in Call of Duty, so even that is a poor example to use, but that's where we are at now with the yearly releases. And as you hinted at there, talking of yearly releases, sports titles, can't avoid them. The Xbox Bowl is being played on PlayStation in EA Sports College Football 26. For the non-college football fans out there, I'm sure there's a few of you, because it is one of the biggest sports in the US. College bowl games wrap up the season. It's treated like a final. And Xbox for the first year is sponsoring one of those. So we have the Xbox Bowl. But this is actually going to be able to be played on PlayStation. I think this is an important point because, and this is where I chatted to producer Tom at the start of the show before we started recording, when FIFA 15 came out all those years ago, the front cover of the Xbox version had Clint Dempsey in his Seattle Sounders Xbox sponsored shirt. The PlayStation version had to have Clint Dempsey wearing a US national team jersey with no Xbox sponsorship on it because PlayStation didn't want to be advertising their main competitor. We're in 2025 and Xbox is in a world where it doesn't know what it wants to be. It's having an identity crisis. It doesn't know how to market itself. So it's testing these new marketing strategies. And as part of that, they're okay with being on PlayStation and vice versa. They're almost not seen as rivals right now, which is mad to think about when you do that time jump as to how it was before to where we are now. So the Xbox brand, what is it? Does it make sense? Who are they advertising to? It's an interesting one.
I literally thought that it was an Xbox physical bowl because I thought, well, they've put out the Xbox fridge, so maybe they've done a bowl and you put things in the bowl and that's how you express your love for Xbox. So you're totally right. We've seen this, right? This is Microsoft. This is somebody at Xbox marketing going, let's just be like Red Bull, okay? Because you know we're now you know anything is Xbox, so therefore nothing is Xbox. So therefore we have to create like fandom of our brand, and that has to translate something. It's not a terrible idea, right? You know. As you'll know, as a big fan of the, you know, of college sport, you've got an audience of like up to 18 million, right, for this game that'll be watching live. So ESPN
huge audience.
2, I think, is taking it's huge. It's big money. But it's, you know, there's also a college sport version of Madden, isn't there? Or am I hallucinating that?
Yeah, so that's no. So this is the game we're talking about. This is the college football game.
Yeah,
they're bringing the Xbox Bowl into it, which is being played in real life next week. But I think you've touched on there with the size of the audience. This is something they can advertise Xbox to a huge amount of people who don't even know about the console wars. They may still refer to something as, my nephew bought a Nintendo the other day. They don't, they're not aware of the game space in the same way that our listeners would be. So this, I guess, makes sense as to, we want to put the brand out there. We don't know what we're doing with the brand yet, but we can get some eyes on it. And we can point to our investors and go, look at all the engagements we got on this thing we did. We don't know what to do with it yet, but here's the numbers. They're great.
But then they're doing that, and they're doing it in a period between Christmas and Black Friday, where Sony, through price promotion, has absolutely dominated the Christmas sales, and Microsoft's response to that has been to kind of do a brand sponsorship thing, which will resonate with a tiny percentage of people watching that game. Right. And then what happens? And then they go to a retailer and they go, oh, Xbox have put their prices up out of all of the three big console creators, builders, whatever we're calling them. Xbox are the only ones that significantly put their prices up. I can go out tomorrow and get a PS5 for less than I bought mine for 3 years ago. So nice idea. Not sure it'll work.
And with a growing library of games, as more Xbox titles come to PlayStation, one extra game coming to PlayStation is the KOTOR remake, potentially, because some court docs revealed it still exists. They're still working on it. But this is a kind of dash into leaks, because we had another big leak this week. And we're recording this the day before the Game Awards, or the night of the Game Awards, time zones. And it was expected that Leon from Resident Evil would be announced to be returning in the new game. And that was going to be Jeff Keighley's big announcement. Everyone very excited. But some eagle-eye fans have been looking at the PlayStation Store and seen artwork change on the upcoming Resident Evil game, which has Leon all over it before anything has been officially announced. So for this, I think it's just worth a quick think about, no matter the size of the brand, if you're working with a similarly big brand, you got to trust each other to keep the secrets. And even massive brands can fail on that. We're seeing PlayStation leak Capcom's news, so even the biggest brands can be at fault. You can't ever really keep everything under wraps, whether it's in front of the courts or in front of the court of the public.
Well, it makes me think of actually.
Don't know where I'm going with that.
Was it? Yeah. Was it Gamescom or GDC last year where the peripheral maker showed off the Switch 2 accessories before the Switch 2 had been announced, and I think they settled out of court eventually.
So
yeah, but
and you wonder with something like this.
But you know what? I think it will work out fine, right? Because okay, you're not going to get a surprise on the night, but it's one of the most popular game franchises out there. You've got a super engaged player base. The Resident Evil games so far have done $8 billion in revenue, right? And if you include the movies with that, it's 12 billion. So it's kind of top 10 game franchises ever, and you've just basically created a whole load of free PR and marketing discussion. You might get a load more people tune into the Game Awards for this, and they're all going to go and buy the game anyway because it's got Leon in it now. So it's one of those ones where I'm sure someone somewhere got in trouble, but actually I think it works out really well.
They can make it work. When I first saw the story drop, I immediately obviously asked Alex about it, our resident Evil expert, and he was like, well, people have been expecting it anyway. He was kind of already convinced it was happening, so it wasn't really news to him. Maybe he knows something we don't, as someone who has probably spent not many of those billions, but definitely contributed to the the overall success of the franchise. So if it was a different IP, as you touched on, this is one of the top 10, it isn't really as huge a news when you think people were already kind of guessing it was there. So perhaps that is why they can see it in a positive light versus, right, we need to start suing because this has really changed the game.
Exactly. And look, you know,
I don't know. We will.
There are 30 games. There are 30 console games in the Resident Evil series if you went across all platforms. So it's not like you're giving away a big secret.
Well, we'll put that in the time capsule, and then we'll open it up next week, post Game Awards, and we'll have some different insight into what happened, how they told that story, and if everything may have been a bit differently. Maybe it won't even happen at all. It could be one massive trick. We don't know, but we will see. So I think that wraps up today as we finish the rapid rundown. Thank you for joining, John. It's been a pleasure having you on for your podcast debut. Good.
Thank you, Jack.
Good showing. Man of the match performance. For those who have also made their pod debuts today, it would be great if you would stick around and subscribe for more. We have an extensive back catalogue building up, and if you want more of these but can't wait a week to hear another recording, we can give you these stories every day in the daily download. I went a bit Australian there. Shout out to our Australian audience.
Daily download, mate.
You can subscribe to the daily download and get, as it says on the tinny, these stories every day. So go check that out. We'll have links in the description from all the stories covered today. and to where you can find more content from us. So thank you again, John. And we will see everyone again on the next one. Over and out.